Oh, okay. So I think we should just start. All right. So I'm going to share my screen again, and let me just share my screen. Okay. All right. So now we are talking about how to solve regular day-to-day challenges with Python. In the place where you work or at home or any leisure activity you do, one of the things that you might see yourself trying to do is trying to write a program to solve that particular challenge you're having wherever you are. I encourage this a lot because programming looks very abstract until you start writing programs that solve everyday challenges. So when you encounter a problem, for example, you're using Microsoft Excel, what do? You cook up your Python, write something, and then, just solve the problem. So that's how you get better in programming. That's how it works for me, actually. Because me, I cannot say I'm there. I'm still a learner, serious learner, all right? So, but it's what I've discovered on my learning journey is that as you keep trying to solve any problem that you face in life with Python, you just keep getting better and better at it. So last week we just laid the foundation, and because of network problems, I'm just going to run through everything that we did last week as if we did not do anything. All right. So I'm just going to start from the scratch. Now, if you want to create a GUI, that's a graphic user interface. What we are used to so far is that in writing Python code, we've been writing code, for example, can just start with for this and that, But what we've been writing so far is like the back end of the code that drives all of that. But we can't just, sorry, we can't just take codes like that, and just throw it at the people. There has to be something with which they interface with the code, for which there are instructions that are already written, and then when they interface with the code, they get the results that they desire. For example, if you take a piece of code like something like what you see here, just like this now, and just throw it at a user, the user might just be wondering, okay, so what is this supposed to mean? What is self? What is, what is self.setMessage? The person is just going to get overwhelmed and not even understand what you're talking about, all right? But then if you throw an app, all right, like this to the person knows, oh, okay, so what I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to put in something here, click on this button, press calculate, and it's going to run for me. So you can see that the layman prefers you to use a GUI, that's a graphical user interface, to interface with him when you're creating an app, all right? So that's why we have this, this course on solving daily challenges for people, so that when somebody prompts you and like, I'm having an issue like this, and you just think, okay, this thing can be automated through Python, then you just roll out a GUI with the code at the back end, that the person can use to, run the app. All right. So what happens is that after we're done with the code and everything, then you can compile it into a .exe file, so that the code and the UI can run together immediately. Somebody activates the .exe. So that way you can ship it to anybody that has, a compatible system can just run the app without having to worry about seeing the code or whatever. So let's begin with Tkinter. Now, there are different GUI frameworks in Python. And let me just new slide. Okay. So there are different GUI frameworks in Python. There is Tkinter, there is Qt5, there is Kiwi, there is KiwiMD, there is PyGui, there is which one again? I'm trying to remember the last one now. There are about 6 of them, all right? So, but you see all of these ones, you have to pip install them. So they don't come native with your Python, but this is the only one that already comes installed in your Python. It's just native inside your Python already. So you don't need to install anything. Once you have your Python, you can just run it off the bat, all right, like that. So let's roll. Now, before we roll, one of the things I want us to note is, okay, let me just draw it like this. I like to call it the anatomy of a GUI. So every GUI exists in a window. You know, your normal window buttons, and then this, all right? So this is a window. Now, every window must have a title. So this title is actually a property or an attribute, if you like, under the window class. Okay, so call this title here. Now, inside of this window, there are different things we can want to use to get people to, you know, put their inputs or whatever it is we want the app to do. All of those things are called widgets. And there are different kinds of widgets. So there are entry boxes where you see those boxes where you put in, you type, you know, anything. So type it here. All right. So these are entry boxes. Then there are labels that describe what those entry boxes are supposed to do. All right. So this is a label. This is an entry box. Then you can have things like checkboxes with descriptors. Okay. You can also have buttons that do different things. You can even have a different sizes or whatever, depending on what you like. Okay. So there are, yeah, those are the major kinds of widgets really that we get to see in every app, both Android apps, you know, desktop apps, what have you. So what happens is Tkinter is like an entry-level GUI designer, even though you can use it to design beautiful apps. But the mother of all GUI is KiwiMD. Why? Because with KiwiMD, you can design Android apps, you can design iOS apps, you can design apps that will run on any platform, really, any platform. And they all use this same principle, but it's just that the code base is a bit more, you know, different. So, but Tkinter being an entry level and native library it has a more straightforward code base than all of these ones that you have to import all their classes into Python before you start using. So let's begin with Tkinter for today. If we have time next week or some other time, maybe 2 weeks later, we're going to touch KiwiMD. All right. So so that you can see how we begin to build apps for Android and whatever using Python. Now, is that the ideal thing? No, because most people think that whenever you're building an app for Android, you should use Java or Kotlin or Dart. These are the 3 languages that Google supports natively for Android apps. But then these languages have a very high learning curve. So we tend to now use things like this Kiwi to achieve the same thing we would have achieved, with these ones, all right? So yeah, now let me go to the other app that I showed you now. I want to recreate this app. So let me just run it. So I'm just going to run this, run code. Okay, so when I run the code, what you see here is a US dollar to pound converter, right? So what it does is basically, it takes whatever I put in here. When I press calculate, it calculates what the value is. And then when I press reset, it cleans it so that I can put in another value. Okay, so we're just going to replicate this, and then it's going to give you a general idea of how building apps in Python work with Tkinter, even though it's still the same logic, but it's just that the apps are different. Another thing you'd notice is that this app has just one window. There are some apps that, in fact, the average apps has nothing less than 4 windows, because there's a splash screen. For example, when you open your Facebook, there's one blue screen that just shows, okay, Facebook. Then after that, another screen comes up, which says enter your username and password. And then when you enter that, if the password is correct, another screen comes up, which says, okay, that now brings out the various parts of the app for you to interact with. So it's the same thing. If you're building a one window app, it's just a single window. But if you're building a multi-window app, you have to replicate each of these things, each of these codes that you're building for each of the windows, So we're just going to start with a single window app, all right, before things become very, very complex. So the first thing I'm going to do is, like we always do in Python, we're going to import the libraries. Now, I can just say import Tkinter, all right? But because of our bad habits, I'll just import it as TK, because we always like to shorten things, all right? So this alias TK now replaces Tkinter in anytime I want to make reference to Tkinter in the app. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to import all the widgets that I'm going to use in the app. So if you look at this app, for example, that I just displayed right now, it has the following widgets. So we have window, all right? We have entry, an entry box here. We have a label here. We have a check button. We have a calculate button, a reset button, and then we have an output, okay, which is the label output. So what I've done is I have named everything here the way I'm going to create their variables, because that's what we do in Python when we code. When we code, we must tell Python, in fact, that's what variables are. Python is not smart. In fact, the computer is not smart. So whenever you're writing code, you have to keep telling the computer what it is you're doing. So when you want to create a new window, you're going to create a variable actually and tell the computer, hey, computer, I am creating a new window. The name of this window is this. All right. So now, computer, I'm creating a new label. The name of the label is this. Computer, I am creating a new check button. The name of the new check button is this. So that when the computer sees a check button that is named so maybe entry level check button, it doesn't get confused. Just knows, oh, okay, you were talking about this. All right. So what I've done is I have named all the variables based on what they do. So for example, this is window. I'm just going to call it win, all right? Now, this is the label for the USD. So I'm just going to call this one USD label because that's the label. It just talks about the dollar, where you enter the dollar. This is the entry box for the USD. So I'm calling it USD entry. That's the name of the variable. This button is the check button for terms. So I'm just going to call it terms check button. This one is the calculate button. So I'm just going to call it the calculate button as a variable name. This one is the reset button. Same way I'm going to call the reset button as a variable name. And then this is a label for the output. So I either call it output label or GBP result label. So let me call it output label. All right. Okay. So now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to create all of the widgets that I need, because these widgets are objects. All right. So I need an entry box, I need a label, I need a check button, and I need ordinary buttons. So I'm just going to import that from Tkinter imports. So I'm going to import entry. I'm going to import label. I'm going to import buttons, and I'm going to import check button. Right. So these are the 4 things that I need in that widget. Now let's begin the program. So to begin this program, I will start that by telling Python that my window, which is win that I said I'm going to call it, is tk.tk. Now, this is just a way to initialize the Tkinter class. If you remember our class on object-oriented programming, so what we're just doing is we're just using this this variable name win to create to instantiate the TK class so that the computer knows, okay, you want to create a GUI. And then I'm just going to write win.main loop this. Why? Because if I don't put this, anytime I run the program and it's done, it will just exit. I won't even see the UI. But by putting this main loop on, what it does is it continues, it's like an infinite loop. It just continues looping and keeping the UI in front of me. All right. So let me run this and then let's see how it goes. So great. So this is it. This is the most basic, what do you call it now? Sorry, the most basic of the UIs. It's just a window. It doesn't have anything, all right? Just a window. So now we'll now begin to pad our UI so that we can make it look like what it ought to look like. Now, let's begin. The first thing we want to do, based on what we have here, is to create a title in this UI. So I'm just going to go back to VS Code. And then remember, object-oriented programming, you refer to the object property that you want to change with the dot notation. So I'm just going to say win.title, because I want to change the title of that win object, all right? So win.title, I'm just going to put integrated MLAI converter. All right, so now I'm going to run that, but nothing will happen, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, yeah, so something will happen because it will change the name of the stuff. Okay, so the next one I'm going to do now, nothing will happen, but I'm just going to explain why nothing will happen when I do it. So what I've done here is I've changed the name of the type, that's the title of the app. So it's now going to be showing integrated MLAI converter. Okay, so the next thing that I want to do right now is I want to create the label. So label, and this first label that I want to create is the USD label. So I'll just go straight to this place and I'll create USD underscore label. And this USD label is an instance of the label class, because this label class, we're using this USD label as an object to instantiate it. All right. So when you are instantiating an object, if you notice, you can see that label is a class. All right. So when you're instantiating an object, there are 2 things that the object might ask you for. it might ask you for the attributes. All right. If you remember when we were doing object-oriented programming, you would notice that we had to do self, comma, maybe height, weight, and stuff like that. That's when we're using attributes to instantiate an object. But sometimes what is being used to instantiate an object will be things like parameters instead of outright attributes. So in this case now, what this one is asking us for is parameters. So the first thing is asking for is the master. Now, what is master? Master is the item that this thing will be hooked onto. So in this case now, remember this label, if you look at this place, this label is pinned to the window. So it means that the master object where this label is going to be pinned to is going to be win. All right. So that's this window. I'm just going to put the variable name here. Now, the next parameter that I'm going to put, you see there are different parameters. I can decide on the color of the label. I can decide on the background, the foreground, and all of that. But for just the purpose of this class, the other variable that I'm just going to supply is the text that is going to be showing on the label. So, and the text that I want to show on the label is enter USD amount here. Okay, so I'm done with my USD label. Also, I think, because when I run it right now, you'll notice that nothing is showing here. So why is nothing showing? The reason is simple. I have only told Python what my label should look like. I have not told Python where to put my label. So in order to tell Python where to put our label, there is something called geometry managers, all right? And we have to tell Python the geometry where we want to put our label. So I'm just trying to add a new slide so that I can show the geometry managers. Okay, so new slide. All right. Okay, so I told you they are called geometry managers. And what do they do? Very simple. They help you plan the geometry of your app. So every app can be divided into 3 kinds of geometry. There is the one of .pack, there is the one of .place, and there is the one of .grid. So if we decide to use .pack, what happens is that we are telling Python, put this in the toppermost part of the window and just, pack it the way you deem fit. So let me show what it would look like if I just say, Python, do me a USD label.pack. So when I do this and I run it, you'll see what Python does with my label. Oh, okay, code is already running. Let me just close this, all right? Okay, so, okay. So, let me see if this makes any difference. All right, run code. Okay, so this is what happens. You can see that Python has put the label in this topmost center parts of the whole screen. And this is not really what we want because, I mean, .pack is not the standard, okay? So the other geometry manager we have is .place. Dot place divides this thing into tiny grids, very tiny lines, all right, based on, I think, inches or centimeters, I can't remember now. So if we use dot place, we're going to have to tell Python where exactly it should put the x-axis, you understand, in cms, or I think cms, right? And then y in cms. So it's just going to be like your regular graph sheet that you normally use for mathematical plotting those days in your secondary school. All right. So and that is not really like um my preferred option, because I mean, I don't need that level of granularity for a desktop app that I want to build. So my preferred geometry manager is .grid. And what it just does is, instead of dividing this into large, instead of dividing this into very large, a very small grid, it just divides it into large grids, all right, depending on what my app size looks like. So I could just have this. So these are the rows. This is the first row, second, third, fourth. But you know, in normal programming convention, begins with 0, 1, 2, 3. These are my columns. This is column 0, column 1, column 2, and column 3. So I'm going to now tell Python where I want this label to be. All right. So instead of USD label.pack, I'm just going to say USD label.grid. So when I open the grid, the first thing it asks me for is mapping. But because I've already mapped it to win here, I don't need to, Python already knows, okay, this thing is mapped to win, all right, which is the mother window. So the next thing I'm just going to tell Python is the row and the column where I want this thing to be. So I'm going to tell Python that I want this thing in row 0, that's in the first row. And I want it in column, I want it in column 1. So column equals to 1. No, 0 actually. Okay. So when I do this, I run it. Okay, let me see. It's like there's a chart. Okay, who determines the number of rows and columns? You do. You determine the number of rows and columns by yourself. All right. So I'm going to run this right now, and yep. So what we have here is enter amounts here. You can see now it's not like .pack where you know, Python just put it anywhere it deems fits in the middle. All right. So this one has been positioned on row 1, column 1. Now, the next thing that I want to do now, lest I forget, is that if you notice so far, I've been able to resize the screen, but sometimes you might want it to be such that you're not able to, that the person that is using it should not be able to resize the screen at will, all right? So that's part of the window will be win.resizable. So you can actually decide that this win.resizable, you don't want it. And if you notice, the parameters that it requires are Boolean parameters, true or false. So the default value is true. If I didn't put anything there, it will default to true. All right, but in this case, if I put false, that's for the heights. I don't want them to be able to adjust the width, false, and then the height to false. So it means I don't want them to be able to adjust anything, you know, whether the height or the width. So when I run this right now again, you'll notice that I have my app here, and that button, the maximize button, has disappeared, and I cannot adjust it anymore. Why? Because resizable is false. So Anu, please go ahead with your question.
Okay, so what I was trying to ask was,
yeah,
you divided that box into like 3 rows and 4 columns, but I could divide it into 2 columns and 2 rows. So how does the program Python now know Okay, now I'm talking about this position in the box.
Okay, so what I've done is, if you look at the grid manager, I have told Python, put it in row 0, column 0. So what Python has done is, if you look at that app when I run it, in this place, this is where it puts that enter USD amount here.
Okay, so let's keep it on this your sheet here. So
Okay.
you might have in mind row 1, column 2, and what me I'm seeing is row 2, column 3. You know it's possible.
Yes, it is, but don't let it confuse you, because it's just a matter of your internal geometry in your mind. Because somebody might think, okay, when I run this app, is it not looking longer than one row? You understand? But that's the thing. Because Python will not, let me remove this resizable and run it again. So somebody might be wondering, but is this not looking very long? Is this not looking longer than a column? Actually, what Python does is that when you create a label like this, the place that that label stops becomes the boundary of that column. So that's what happens. So automatically, this place here is where column 0 stops and row 0 stops. So I want to believe that that will be clear. But if it's not, you can still raise your hand and then we'll look at it again. Now, so we are done with this first one, which is the label. The next thing we want to work on right now would now be the entry. All right, so the entry box. So I'm just going to go back to this place now. And one of the things I like doing, I like my codes being modular. So I'm going to leave a space between label and entry. All right, so that I know that I'm actually creating another, another entity. So I'm going to call that USD entry. I think that was the variable name that we gave it. And in this case, it's going to be an entry box, all right? And since we are instantiating an entry class, we are going to use the parameters. The first is the win, all right, which is the master. So once we have told the Python the master, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tell Python what it should do. But if you look at this diagram here, it's actually blank, waiting for user input. So that means it won't have any default text inside of it and stuff like that. So we're just going to leave it at win for now. I'm going to come back to this. Now, the next thing we're going to do is to use the geometry manager to show the geometry where we are going to put this. So we would have USD entry dot grid, and then this time it's going to be in row 0 still, but we want it in column 1 now. So because if you remember very well, in column 0 we had the label. So let me just run this and let's see what it looks like right now. Okay, so this is what it looks like right now. So we have our USD label and the entry box where you can enter anything you want to enter. All right, so let me close it. Now let's look at the next thing we want to create, the check button, right? Checkbox if you like. So I'm going to create that check button right now. Again, I'm going to leave like 2 spaces or 3. So the name of that checkbox, we agreed it's going to be called terms check button. So I'm just going to call that terms underscore check button. And this terms check button will be a check button. All right. So since it's a check button, the first thing we want to do again is to put the master, which is win. And what will be the text that will accompany that check button? So this time we're going to ask person to say, I understand the terms. Okay, so again, as usual, if we stop here, nothing is going to happen when we run the app because we have not told Python where to put that check button. So that's why we'll do .grid. And we will now tell Python to put it in row number 1, which is the next row after row 0, where the entry and the label are. Okay. And then, but this time, we want it to span across columns. So let's not tell Python the column it should put it in. Instead, let's tell Python we want it to span 2 columns or 3 columns or 4 columns, depending on how you like it. But for now, let's just say 2. And then I'm going to press run so that I can run this and let's see what it looks like. So you can see that why it's looking like this is because I have the column span set at 2. So what it's doing is it's going beyond column 1 and column 2, just spanning at the middle, just like merge and center if you're using Excel. Okay, so the next widget we're going to create are the buttons. All right, so let's create the calculate button first. Now, I'm going to go like 2 spaces down and let's call that calculate button like we agreed when we were creating the mockup of the app. And that's one of the things you really want to do every time. Like I always tell you, personally, I don't like jumping into Visual Studio first to start writing code without having even if it's vaguest of ideas of what I think whatever I'm trying to create will look like on paper. So I've just tried to do it on paper to see what it is that I'm trying to create. So I'm going to call this calculate button. And this calculate button is going to be an instance of button, right? And again, it's going to be tied to the window. That's the master. It's going to be hooked to window as a master. And then the colors and whatever, for now, I'm just going to leave that blank. I'm just going to call this text equal to, so I'm just going to type calculates. As usual, I'm going to tell Python where to put it. Normally, I could also do it like this, .grade, all right, and put everything. But like I said, I like making my code readable because I believe if the code is readable, tomorrow, if somebody does not really know what's up and tries to read through your code, they will understand what you're doing. But if you just do everything like that on one line, sometimes it becomes a bit worrisome, especially if it's a beginner that is trying to read your code. So I could just put the .grade there and, but let me do the .grade in the next line. So calculate button .grade. And then I'm going to tell Python that I want this calculate button in the row number 2, which is the row after where the check button is. And then column number 1. All right. Okay. So let me run this and let's see what it looks like. All right. So this is what it looks like. Okay. Now, okay, I put column 1 here. That's why it's there. It's actually supposed to be in column 0. So let me just close this, run it again, and so that it goes to column 0 to stay. So run code. Yep. So we have it in column 0. Now, let me put the next button, which is the reset button. So reset button will be a button again and hooked to the win. And this time the text that is going to show on the button will just be reset. Again, I could just do reset button, sorry, reset button dot grid. Would be same row as the calculate button, but in another column. So column 1. All right. So now I'm going to run this. And then we're going to have this. Right? So this is what our no. Sorry. Okay, so this is what our app looks like here. All right. You would notice something that the apps look like the calculate and the resets are running away from themselves. Sorry, and I don't want this to happen. I want them to come close to each other. So remember, the default justification for Python when it comes to Tkinter is the center justification. So it means I'm going to justify this to the right, and I'm going to justify this reset button to the left so that they can meet together. Now, I don't know who advised them to do this, but in Python, justification carries the cardinal points in the map. So this is north, this is south, this is east, this is west. So when I want to justify, instead of justifying right, I justify east. If I'm justifying to the left, I justify west. If I'm justifying to the top, north, south. All right. So in this case, I'm going to be justifying to for this one now, I'm going to be justifying to the right, and then the other one justifying to the, so this one is east, the other one is west. But you won't just type justify. There's something called sticky. That's the parameter. So sticky just means you want to stick it to what part. Now, what part do you want to stick it to? I'm just going to put east for this one. And then for this one, I'm going to put west. All right, so W. Now I'm going to save this. So let me close this and run the app again. All right. So now you can see that it looks a bit more presentable. Yep. Sorry. Okay. So here we are. USD calculates. Okay. So, but you notice that when we press these buttons, nothing happens yet. All right. So let's just continue doing what we are doing. Later, we will now add all the functions that will make the buttons start working. So the last thing we're going to do here, which is the last thing, is the output label, and it's just the label. All right. So we're going to create that here, and we'll call it output underscore label. And it's going to be a label, and it's going to have win as the master. But we don't want it to carry default text. We want it to carry the results of whatever it is that we're going to do when we calculate the exchange rate. So we're not going to put any amount here. We're going to use a variable to set that result much later. All right. So we're just going to leave it at win. And then the grid, output label dot grid, would be on row number 3, and then column span of 3 rows. Okay, so yep. Okay, let's use 2, just like we used for the checkbox. Right. Okay, so let's use 2. Column span 2 rows. Okay. Okay, for now, let's do that. We can always change that later. So right now we have succeeded in creating all the widgets in this app. So the next thing is we now have to make these buttons functional. And by just listening to what I just said, you already know what we have to do. When I said we have to make these buttons functional, exactly, it means we have to create the functions that will drive this button. So we'll need two functions, a calculate function and a reset function. All right. So let me close this one. Now, let me start with the function for calculate. All right. And let me put that here above all of these. So I will call that calculate. All right. As usual, we'll tell Python what to do when we want to calculate. So the first thing we want to tell Python is Python, we want you that when we click calculate, you will go to this place here and pull whatever it is. This ability to pull whatever value has here means that whatever value we put in here has to be, number one, a variable. And it has to, this variable has to be a part of, it has to be an object, all right? This variable has to be an object that has the .get method. Because this .get is what will allow Python draw the value. If it doesn't have this .get method, you know, Python cannot be able to, your function cannot be able to draw the value from this box. Now, there are various objects that you can use in Tkinter, native objects that have this .get method. But the one we're going to use for this session is called the string var. So this one has the .get method. So what it means is that we're going to create this box, all right? And the result of anything that is typed in here as a string var, all right? And then we will now use the .get method to solve the challenge that we have. So let's do that right away so that everything can start working. Now, the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to come to this entry box, all right? And like I told you, if you notice, this entry box was empty. We didn't put any text value, all right? Because the text value is not static. It's not a constant like enter USD amount here. It's depending on what the person enters inside. So that's why we left it, because it's going to be variable. It's not a constant. And whenever you want to create anything in Tkinter as a variable, especially in all of this, you use this stuff here called text variable as one of the parameters. So in this case, we're going to use this text variable to tell Python that, hey, this USD entry box that we have here is just a variable that we want to, you know, anything can be entered inside, all right? So, and we are going to also tell Python, so let's just call this USD ent variable, all right? Which is an instance of the string var class. And then we're going to tell Python to put this USD ent var as the variable. So this is what we have done. We have told Python, anytime somebody types anything into this box here, equate whatever this person typed here to that variable. Let it be named that variable entry US var. And that variable entry USD var all right, on its own is a string var class. So it means that it automatically now has the .get method. So what that means is that we can now, when we're writing our function, we can now pull whatever value that is there. So let's go to our function now and then write the function, okay? So here, our function will be, the first thing would be to create a dollar, the dollar value that we want to enter, right? So the dollar value will be an integer, all right? We talked about this a long time ago about how to convert types, all right? So why I'm using this is because when you look at the app, a person can type a text here, you can type anything, you can even type a special character, but I just want to make it in such a way that it will convert that thing that the person types into an integer and then before it runs. So that thing the person types, sorry, that thing the person has to type there, remember, is USD var, all right? So USD var dot get. So whatever the person types in there, Python will need you to convert it into an integer and then equate it to the dollar variable. So that's what the dollar variable is. So we have gotten our dollar variable. Now, to change it to pounds, which is the currency that we want to change it to, whatever we get from dollar, we'll have to multiply it by the exchange rate. Now, maybe next week, we're going to look at how to derive this exchange rate dynamically from a website or from somewhere, you know. But for now, let's just put the exchange rate manually. Let it just be a constant. So just put 1.5, all right, or even 2. Okay, so let me just put that. Now, the next thing I'm now going to do is I am now going to take this pounds value and make it the output. Remember, the output label is supposed to show me that your $7,000 or whatever dollar we put here is worth this amount. So I'm going to have to now take that value in pounds and put it inside a text and equate it to the output value. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to call this output label. I'm just going to copy this name, all right? Output label. And if you remember, I told you one time that when you want to reach to the property of any item, any variable or whatever, any object in Python, you use these square brackets with inverted commas. So the objects in that variable that we want to reach, this output label variable, is the text. I'm sorry, the text attributes, not the text attributes. So the text attributes in that variable will now be, I want us to put this, your dollar, okay, let me just put your USD will be, or is, let me use is equivalent to, and then I'll put another string formatter, all right, and GBP. Now, there are 2 ways you can do your string format, in fact 3 ways, all right, but that's not the scope of this class. So you can decide to leave this and put .format at the end, or you can decide to put the F in front and then put the variables that it should have here, and it should have that pounds here, all right? So whichever way, you know, we're good. So this is what our calculate function does. Then the next button we're going to do is the reset button. So let's create the function for reset. All right. And for our reset function, all we are going to do is we are going to take this same our entry box, all right, and clear everything that is inside the entry box, the text variable, okay? So we are going to go to, we're going to just call this USD entry dot delete, and it's asking us for the first. We'll put 0, that starts from 0, and the last, we can put the last, we can just use end, right? End is a constant, okay, that is available in Tkinter. So when we use that, it will just delete everything from beginning to the end, from point 0 to the end. If we were sure of the number of items that will be in that thing, we probably would just put the count, maybe 20 or 30. But since we are not sure, we want to delete to the end. All right, so now the next thing we will now do, remember, we have not assigned this function to the buttons. So we'll go to this calculate button. One more parameter is command, and we'll tell the that the command here is calculate, and for this one, the command here will be reset, which is named after these functions here, calculates and resets. All right. So with that, I think we can run this app and let's see whether we get, okay, so we have our converter here. So I'm going to enter 10,000, calculate. So you can see now it's telling me that your USD 10,000 is equivalent to GBP 20,000. Why? Because the exchange rate is 2.0. All right. So that in a nutshell is how you create an app. But somebody will now ask me, what if a person puts A5 and just the nonsense stuff here, and I press calculate? It's going to crash this app. You'll notice that the app has crashed. So let me see if the reset is working. Okay, reset is working. So, and I told you that one of the things you must always endeavor to do is to include an error catcher in your apps, so that whenever you create an app, if somebody enters something that doesn't match, it's going to, it's going to correct that for you. So in this case, I'm going to use the try except error catcher. So I'm going to use try. So when, sorry, I'm just going to, because indenting is a big deal in Python. So I'm going to try to get the indents right. Then the next is, if it doesn't work, what should happen? So if it doesn't work, this is what I want you to do. I want you to, what should we do now? Let me just say pass, right? Okay, pass. So because I don't want to create another label right now that would be showing the error message. Okay, but I ought to do that, create another label for the error message that would happen if this thing doesn't work. So I'm going to run this again now. And okay, I don't know why this one keeps coming. All right, so this is it. If I put in 10,000 USD, I say calculate, it gives me 20,000. What if let me just clear this. What if I put, say F, and I say calculate, you can see it does nothing. That's what that pass does. Pass says don't do anything, just remain the way you are. All right. So with that, I can deploy this my code to production if I like, and then I can now compile this into an exe format with one of the tools that can compile Python to exe. So this is where we open the floor for questions and clarifications. So anybody can unmute yourself, feel free. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask any question that you like. Okay. So how can we make it compulsory to tick the checkbox? Great. Okay, so if we want to do that, what we are going to do is we are going to say, let me see. Let me see. Okay, so so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to come and add a line of code here in this calculate. So what the line of code is going to do is it's going to first check the status of the check button. So if what's the name of the check button now? That's temps check button is the status is checked. So where do I get that status again? Now I'll have to find out where to get the status. But once I get that status, I could just put maybe if it's check button dot status. I don't know. I don't know what it is now. I think it's this grab status. I've not tried it before though, but I'm open to trying it much later after the class. So what it does is it will first check if the status is equal to checked, then it can now proceed to run. But if the status is not checked, then it will now proceed to the other side of the error loop, which is to pass or do nothing, or to send a message to the screen that's, hey, this thing you just did now, you need to supply or you need to click the checkbox or something. So that's what will happen. That's what will happen.
I have a question too.
Please go ahead.
If we want this application, let's assume we push it into production and we want it to be globally useful for people that change different currency. So, okay. And now that we are defining it for as maybe US dollar and a particular currency. So let's say I want to convert from Moroccan currency to Nigerian currency now. So okay. How can we input this kind of all these currency things like that?
Okay, so that means we'll have to change the UI of the app. The UI of the app will now look something like this. So instead of having this, we will have enter, they call it functional currency, which is the original currency you want to translate from. All right. Then there'll be a label. There's a label here. Then there'll be an entry box. Then there'll be another label here for conversion rates. Okay, which will be like this. And then it will now be the calculates and resets. And so when you click on calculate, what it does, it will take the functional currency, to also take the conversion rates, and then it will output the label here. So you now see it will take the name of the currency. You can also create another space here, another box where they input the name of the currency. For example, NGN. All right, and then so it will now be your is equivalent to, put the format here, all right? So this part of the label, that's this one will be this functional currency, which is the name of the currency that it will grab from here. So just ngn, and it's equivalent to, it will now be what it gets from this times this. So just like we had it here. So that's one way you can amend it. Well, I mean, this is not the only way. There could be other ways. And that's the thing about programming. People could have 5 different ways to solve the same challenge, and all of them are valid. Oh, so I by no means claim that this is the best way to do it. No, you could come up with brighter ideas tomorrow or even now, and we will all be good.
Thank you very much, sir.
All right, as is. Okay, so any other questions?
Yeah, about the last class,
All right.
I checked on YouTube, it was not there. I wanted
Yes,
to revise.
it was interrupted by our network providers.
Network.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I decided that it would not be fair uploading an incomplete class on YouTube.
Okay.
So right now I'm going to upload this one that is complete on YouTube.
Yeah, because sometimes we like revising before we start again.
Obviously.
Yes.
Obviously.
Thank you.
Right. So this is another thing that I like the Visual Studio for. You'll notice that most of the things that I did not import by default, for example, when I use this end, you'll notice that he imported it for me like on its own. Same thing when I declared this one to be a string var. You notice I did not import it explicitly from the beginning, but you notice that it added it for me automatically. So anything that I'm doing, like this reset button now, it has imported this function for me because I wanted this delete, you know. So that's one of the things that I like Visual Studio for. I have not tried this in Atom or any of all these other visuals, these other code editors, but I think I like yeah. Okay, so Dolly, that answers your question. Where was the reset class that was imported used? Here. So that's it. Actually, I could delete this because when I typed that reset initially, it's made an error when I typed it. So that was when it imported as a class, but it should run right now because this is just a function name, not a class. All right. So if I run it like this right now, it should still run. Yep. It will run. So if I just put 10,000 here and I reset, it cleans it, it still runs. So it was a mistake I did when I entered the reset here as a class. It was supposed to be just an ordinary function. Okay, so I like VSC too. It's multifunctional. Yeah, I like Visual Studio Code. I do. It's about like the best code editor right now, but it's just that when it comes to things like running Jupyter notebooks and all that, I still prefer to run the Jupyter notebooks vanilla or from Spider. So that's just me. Again, it's my choice. It's not enforceable on anyone. That's my choice.
Well, actually, that is true. I tried running Jupyter Notebook on it, and I did not like the way it was running. I mean, just creating a fresh new notebook is somehow hard for me to do unless I'm importing a notebook.
It's usually not a smooth experience like that. So I just prefer running Jupyter Notebook vanilla or through Spider.
Jupyter, yes.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I wanted to say Spider. I've tried it on
yes,
Spider. Yeah, it's good.
Right. Okay. So any other question None. Okay, so in the absence of any other question, I would say thank you everyone for showing up. Remember, you can always drop your questions on the Slack group and we'll attend to all of them. So I believe by next week, we probably will take things a notch higher and then try to introduce one or two nuances into the system, like maybe web scraping to get value and stuff like that. So,
excuse me, sir, you
yes, please.
forgot to share the link last week to the Google.
Oh, okay. So I'm going to share it right now. Just a second. I'm just going to do it right now because I noticed that quite a number of people are not on our Slack. So let me just share it right now. Right. Okay. Well, if there's anybody here that is not on our Python introduction to Python Slack group, please do well to join. It's free and it's going to help you just be able to catch up with what we're doing. Okay, so collab notebooks. Yep. Okay, so get